Welcome to the Elk Talk Podcast with Randy Newberg and Corey Jacobson. Presented by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
The goal is, what little you and I know about elk hunting, we share with people.
I've got an elk building. It's like 120 yards away. What do I do? First off, the thought would never cross my mind when an elk's being 120 yards away to call anybody on a cell phone.
All elk?
All the time? Only elk?
Only elk.
Well, it's us having conversations. So we usually go down some rabbit holes, but
If you hunt with Corey Jacobson, you will find the landscape is full of rabbit holes. We're just going to make this up as we go.
and you look at it like, oh, that's a target-rich environment. But if you're trying to single one out, a solo target there is much easier to go into than a big group.
We record everything, so there's no BSing, no lying, no faking it with us.
Did we hit the record
I
button?
thought I forgot to hit the record button. If you want to know something about elk hunting, this probably isn't the podcast to listen to. Should we give them a list of all the other podcasts where they might learn something? Well, Corey, this is going to be a different format than what the audience is used to.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I'm excited to share it and talk about it. I'm excited to kind of distribute it the way we're going to here over the next several weeks.
Yeah. So what Corey and I cooked up was that rather than take the random listener questions, Corey wrote this really cool article for Elk 101, his website. And did you also mail that article out to your email list?
Yeah, we sent it
Okay.
out, kind of later spring, kind of people are planning vacation times to help decide which week, in the month of September is going to be best for chasing elk this year.
Yeah. So if you aren't on Corey's email list, you should be. How would they do that?
Just go to elk101.com, and I'm pretty sure there's a form at the bottom of the page, and on just about every page that says join our email list. And we're trying to get their emails so that we can send them really good content to help them be better elk hunters.
Yeah. So when people pick this up, it's going to be August 29th, which isn't that when does your Idaho elk season open?
Yeah, August 30th, September opens
Okay.
Wyoming opens September 1st. I mean, most of the states, Montana, I think, is the last one that opens.
Yeah.
They open the first Saturday.
Yeah, always the first Saturday in September.
Yep.
So, yeah, so we'll be, what's that, September 5th or 6th or something like that. So, folks, here's the plan. We are going to take every week of September, kind of like Corey did in the article that he wrote for Elk 101. And since Corey is the guy who anyone would be very excited to have as a consultant about archery elk hunting in September, the audience is going to get Corey Jacobson's consulting services at no charge.
Well, there is a small fee. They have to endure you and I talking about it for 30 or 40 minutes at a time. So it's not exactly free.
So what we're going to do, we're going to walk through every week of the season. I think we broke it up September 1st to the 7th, the 8th to the 14th, 15th through the 21st, and the 22nd through the end of the month, right?
Yeah. Kind of gives you a weekend to weekend time frame, which is when most people are taking vacation time. So
Yeah.
if you're hunting that first week, we're gonna kind of go through and dial in what you're likely to be facing from hunting pressure, from weather, from moon phase, from elk activity, elk behavior, all of these things, and break them down for each week to hopefully help people dial in a strategy and a tactic and a game plan as they're heading out.
Yeah. So depending on whatever week you're going out there, folks, our hope is we cover something that's relevant and applicable to whatever week you're going to be there. So is it fair to say because you could give advice for spike bulls, for raghorns, probably 4.5-year-old type, maybe young 6 points and older is kind of the hope? Or
Yeah.
are you saying, no, this tactic is just for those 400-inch bulls that run around Bozeman?
Yeah, there's definitely a strategy for that one. I really think when we're talking generally, which we have to do, there's always going to be exceptions. But when we're speaking generally, I think we can almost speak generally for all elk. Like, obviously, if
Okay.
we're calling in elk, we probably aren't going to focus on calling in spikes. But if you're getting into the herds, the spikes are going to be with the cows.
Yeah.
If you're calling, if you have a antlerless tag and you're hunting cow elk, you and I did the modulate outdoor class on hunting cow elk, and my advice was, if you're hunting in September for cow elk, hunt them just like a bull. Hunt for bulls. Just know you can only shoot cows. But I mean, go out and call. Have that same experience that you would if you had a bull tag, but then put your tag on a cow.
Yeah. And since you brought that up, anyone interested or listening, Corey's University of Elk Hunting, plus a lot of other stuff is out there at Outdoor Class. So go to outdoorclass.com and use promo code ELKTALK15.
Elk Talk 15, yeah.
I think, yeah.
Yep.
We should know that.
We should, but I'm pretty sure that's it.
Yeah, you'll save some money. So, one of the things that in your article, Corey, and I've tried to, I find people see me looking over here at my spreadsheet, it's because I got a lot of notes here, because I'm going to be the interrogator, and you're going to be the expert. So I'll be the student, you be the expert.
So we're both being actors here. You the interrogator and me the expert. We're outside our normal character.
Oh no, I think you're a far better expert than I am an interrogator. So, one of the things in your article you start with, I think you call it, "What are the best weeks to hunt?" And it says the best week for elk hunting in 2025.
Yep.
And the first subtitle that you have is moon phases. So, tell me what from the Elk 101 Corey Jacobson perspective, do you normally break this topic down by moon phase?
I do. Yeah, there's two key things that I'm looking at. One is the fall equinox, and the other is the moon phase. And there's a lot of other factors that we'll dive into, but those are kind of my starting points to lay out. You've got your calendar. We've broke it down into weeks. So what we're talking about right here is week 1, September 1st through the 8th, somewhere in there. So, there's a little bit of leeway on each side of that, but primarily what we're talking about is early season here. And we haven't really got into pre-rut. Maybe at the tail end of this week, we'll start touching into pre-rut, but we're really still in the early season phase. So moon phase and fall equinox play a part in elk behavior and elk activity. And then the fall equinox actually is what triggers the estrus cycle of the cows. So that's what really triggers the peak rut. So a little later on in September, we'll really get into how the fall equinox contributes to elk behavior. But moon phase is I think we all would agree, when there's a full moon, elk are able to be more active at night. And that means they can be less active during the day, which is when they're more susceptible to predators, whether two-legged or four-legged. The more they can bed down during the day and stay in their sanctuary or their bedding areas, the more protected they are. And when they're on the move or when they have to feed out in the open during daylight hours, they're just more exposed to danger. So a full moon will affect how an elk behaves. And when it comes to hunting elk, I think in mountain states like Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, Colorado, elk are less affected. Their behavior is less affected by moon phase than in the desert states like New Mexico and Arizona, Nevada, southern Utah, some of those states. In my experience, I've hunted elk in 9 different states, and in seeing that, there is a difference in how they behave based on the moon, especially in those desert states. There's a switch that goes off at about 8:15 or 9 o'clock in the morning, and the elk bed down and they go quiet for the day. And when you have a full moon, it happens a little bit earlier. And then in the evening, sometimes you don't even start hearing bugles until 20, 30 minutes before dark. That's when they get up and start getting active, just because they can take advantage of those nighttime hours for activity. So I start with moon phase. We lay out the calendar and then look at the moon phase for each of those weeks. And this year, it's not ideal in this upcoming first week of September.
No, we're coming into a full moon. Full moon is September 7th this year.
Yeah, so it lands right at the end of week 1, which means the week leading up to the full moon, you're going to have quite a bit of moon. We're starting at over half moon, and by the time we finish week 1, it'll be full moon. And so it's going to be a lot of nighttime light for elk activity.
You're not encouraging me. Well, I planned on going September 1st through the 10th.
Yeah, and I'm going September 1st through the 8th on one of my hunts in the same state as you. So,
all right.
Fortunately, both of us are going to be hunting a mountain state during that week.
Yeah.
So moon phase isn't quite as important, and we'll come back around to that and dig in a little bit more detail. But other factors that we're going to face, during that first week, we've got the benefit of less hunting pressure preceding this week. So most states are just now opening, meaning the woods haven't been filled with hunters for the last 4 weeks. So the elk are going to be, we have a fresh pool of elk that haven't been harassed yet. So that's a benefit. They haven't got into being chased into sanctuaries. They're still in their summer patterns. As far as the cows and the calves, the bulls, a little bit different. So I think it's important here to understand what the bulls have been doing the last 2 or 3 months. So during May, June, July, the bulls are in bachelor groups. So they're all together, they're hanging out. There may be 2 bulls, there may be 26 bulls, but they're grouped up, and it's just bulls during that time of year. They're in velvet, they're in the higher country where bugs aren't affecting their antlers and just better feed. They're usually away from the cows. The cows have their calves down a little bit lower, the bulls are up higher, and that's where they spend the summer. Then about 2 weeks ago or so, 10th to 15th of August, the bulls start breaking out of their bachelor groups, and the big, more mature bulls are the first ones to break away. You might still find some little raghorns hanging out together this week during the first week of September, but those bigger bulls move off by themselves. They're starting to feel it. Testosterone's starting to build, and they don't want company. They're getting irritable. Another bull around them just makes them want to fight. And so they move off by themselves into what I call staging areas or bull bedrooms. And this time of year, mid-August into first week of September, that's where they're hanging out. They haven't really gone necessarily to find the herds yet, but they're close to the herds. And in these bull bedrooms, they're rubbing their antlers multiple times a day. And that's how they get the velvet off. It's also how they strengthen their neck muscles to get ready for the rut. So when you get into these areas, you're going to notice there are 30 or 40 rubs within sight. Just all these trees are rubbed. And you might think, oh, this is a great rutting area. But typically when you see that many rubs together, that's their staging area, their bull bedroom. And they end up leaving that about the end of the first week into the second week of September. So first week of September, you're probably going to be hunting some of these more mature bulls before they've got their herds established, which is a good thing. It's less cows pulling them, less cows to contend with eyes and ears. So we've got less hunting pressure. The elk haven't been pressured as much. We've got these more mature bulls that are kind of staged off by themselves, and they're really irritable, and they're in a very special place to them. They're bull bedrooms, so they're very territorial of this, and they don't want company. So it can create some opportunity to stir up the hornet's nest a little bit during that first week.
So in this bull bedroom, if you say you glass one and he just goes to bed in his bedroom, would your normal approach be cow calling, bugling, or would you do you have a standard approach to that?
Yeah, and so this leads into that next phase or the next just thing that we're dealt with. It's early season, so the elk aren't rutting yet, but they're starting to think about the rut, and with them being territorial, they're starting to vocalize a little bit more. They've separated from the bachelor group, so the bulls will be locate bugling a little bit more, just keeping tabs on each other, just announcing their presence in the area. And so for me, I think my primary philosophy when it comes to calling is be aggressive. But I always start less aggressive, because once you open the can, once you pull the lid off of the aggression, you can't put it back in the can. So I always start less aggressive, because then I can escalate if I need to. So I'm going to start with cow calls if I see a bull and I know where he's going. But a lot of times we don't have that benefit. So we're covering a lot of country, and I know that we are going by a lot of elk that just aren't answering us yet. They just aren't vocal yet. So my philosophy is find an elk that is vocal. Because if I can find an elk that's vocal, A, I know there's an elk there. B, he's vocal. So that means if I get in close and do try to coax him in with cow calls or pull the aggressive card and really push his buttons, he's vocal. So he's going to play. He's going to communicate, and he's going to take the bait. So I want to find a vocal bull during this week, and you got to cover a lot more country to find that vocal bull. But I've always had really good luck early, because they aren't pressured and because they are starting to communicate and be vocal. So we can find them. Just understand it's not going to be, you aren't going to let out a bugle and the whole hillside's probably not going to erupt with 7 different bulls bugling. You might have to cover 4 or 5 miles and hit a lot of pockets with elk in it to find one that will answer you.
Okay. It's kind of like fishing. Keep going until you find the ones that are willing to bite. You might see them on your electronics, but not all of them want to bite.
Yep. There's always a fish somewhere that's hungry.
Yeah.
And it's the same with elk. There's always an elk somewhere that just that day he woke up and said, you know what? I feel like fighting today. Whatever it is, he laid down on a hornet's nest, he laid on a stick, he slept on his shoulder wrong, but he wakes up and he is just, today is the day that he's had enough. And a lot of elk don't feel that the first week, but there's always one somewhere that does. So from there, if I see an elk go into his bed, if I get a location bugle from an elk, I know where he's at, because they aren't moving too much during this time of year. Towards the end of the week, they're going to start roaming a little bit. But I think the 1st through the 5th, we can kind of count on most of these bulls being solo and being less aggressive and not moving very far. So they're finding feed and water really close to where they're safe in that bedding area. So during that time, if you come to a spot and there are 15 or 20 trees that are rubbed with fresh, bark laying on the ground, that bull's right there somewhere. And that's that's when you can start utilizing the calls. So when you ask, do I use cow calls? Do I use bugles? I'm going to start with cow calls, and I'm going to listen, because a lot of times these bulls, you get 200, 300 yards from where they're bedded, you give them a couple of cow calls and they're like, it's not quite time, but there's a cow close by. I'm going to go check it out. So a lot of times they'll just come in quiet and you'll just hear a branch break as they come slipping in on the downwind side or on the uphill side where they can get a visual advantage above you. So making sure you're in a good setup where you can see downwind and kind of make sure that you've got shooting lanes above you if they do come in there. That's going to be important. Start with cow calls and listen. If they answer the cow calls, now you know they're interested in the cow. They're at least willing to communicate with the cow. So that's helpful. That's a little piece of information that, hey, I gave 2 cow calls and he immediately answered. We've got an opportunity here. If he's coming into the cow calls and talking, your job's easy. He's coming in. He's probably coming in more timid, not coming plowing down the hill. So he's probably going to circle downwind. He's going to try to make sure he's protected from danger. If he answers a couple times to the cow calls, but still is staying in his bed, which is probably most likely what's going to happen, I'm going to get to a perfect setup inside 150 or 200 yards if I can. And that doesn't always exist. Depends on the terrain, all of that. But you want to make sure that you're capitalizing on a good setup. Don't set up in a spot where you don't have shooting lanes. Don't set up in a spot where he's going to get to 100 yards and see across the meadow and not see an elk and not come any closer. But if you can get him to come inside 40 yards of the shooter before he can see where the calls are coming from, and on the downhill side, downwind side, there's a really good chance that the shooter's going to get a shot. And again, that bull's probably not going to get up out of his bed and come walking right into the setup. He's probably going to bugle 2 or 3 times and try to get that cow to come to him. And that's when I pull the lid off the can and let the aggression out. And that it's my favorite. In early season, we have had some screaming matches with bulls that will rival anything during the peak of the rut, because now we've got in there, we've kind of worked them up that, hey, I remember who I am now. I'm the best bull on the mountain, and all these cows are interested in me. And look at this one. She wandered within 300 yards of me, probably looking for me because I'm such a big deal here on the mountain. And he's trying to convince her company, oh, she's playing hard to get. It's not quite time yet. And then all of a sudden, his buddy, who he spent the summer with, who they can't stand each other now, screams at him from 300 yards away and says, I've already claimed her. He can't handle the challenge. They're wired to come undone when they're challenged at close distance. That's just how they establish their dominance. That's how they establish their harems. That's just how they're wired. So he's got that going against him. Secondly, he hasn't smelled humans over and over and over again. So he's not going to be quite as wary coming in. And then the last part of that is he's in a place where he feels safe. And he's in a place where he doesn't want company, especially another bull. And he's feeling like he's a dominant bull. So there's a good chance that if you're in close to that bull and you do get aggressive, he's going to come in to run you off. And he's been rubbing his neck or his antlers, strengthening his neck. He's ready to use the antlers by this time. And that's how they establish who the big bull is. So, we're talking being aggressive, and you're probably thinking, well, that'll work on big bulls. But, I'm hunting an area where there's a lot of immature bulls or different things. But again, going back to how they're wired, those young bulls will still come in looking to fight, or at least thinking they have a chance. And in that case, they haven't been ran off by other bulls for the past 3 weeks. This is their first chance to kind of prove themselves, and they might feel a little bit tougher than they really are during this first week.
So when you say I get close, you've described this situation. Okay, you're 200 yards, a cow call, he responds. Do you move closer then? And if so, how close do you try to get before you decide, all right, I'm going to pull the lid off the can here and I'm going to get with it?
The closer you can get, the better. So terrain's going to dictate that. You never want to move in. If a bull's in his bed and you can tell he's just got this wimpy little bedded bugle, he's not putting any effort into it, and he gives you 3 or 4 of those in a row, he's probably not moving. And so that gives you a little bit more leeway to get up and move 40 yards, 50 yards quietly. So the next time he hears you're on top of him, and he doesn't have a choice to retreat. He knows that he's backed against the wall. He's in his bedroom, and he's got to respond by coming into you. So when a cow call, if he answers and he's 300 yards away, I'll probably try to move in 50 or 100 yards more. Once I get inside 200 yards, I'm pretty confident that that's close enough. And the last thing I want to do is, take a risk of trying to get another 30 or 40 yards and then bumping him. And then I've just introduced that whole thing that they deal with the next 4 weeks, which is smelling humans, seeing humans, being bumped by humans, and they just get smarter and smarter.
Yeah. When you do this aggressive bugling, do you stay stationary or do you move?
So if we have a shooter and a caller, if you have a 2-person setup, the caller's job is to pull that bull into the shooter's lane. So if the bull's starting to swing uphill to get a visual advantage, as the caller, I'm going to swing downhill and try to pull that bull right into the shooting lane where he thinks now he has a visual advantage. He's got the wind good. Everything's good. He's thinking there's no danger at all. And he's feeling safe to step into that shooting lane. So as a caller, I'm moving. As a shooter out front, no movement at all. I'm locked into my setup because the last thing you want to do again is get up and move and bump that bull.
Okay. That's
perfect world. First week of September, you've got to find a vocal bull. You've got to be able to get in close. He doesn't have cows. He's territorial. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you don't always find that during the first week. They're not going to be as vocal. There might be a younger bull that's already with the herd, and now you've got a bull that's with cows that knows he's a younger bull that's a little more timid. and knows that if he comes into aggressive bugling, he might lose those cows. So there's a lot of variables that are at play here.
Yeah. So this time of the year, water, whether it's water because they're coming in to drink, water because they're wallowing, how do you use
Yeah.
that as a tool, if at all?
So water is super important during this first week because we're still probably going to be dealing with heat. And I mean, again, I've had snow the first week of September. I've had mid 90s first week of September. So it's always a wild card, but you can count on as the days get shorter, which they're going to every day from here on out, it's just going to start getting cooler. And you're going to start getting cooler weather, generally speaking, the further into September you go, which means the closer to the front of September you are, the warmer weather you're probably going to be dealing with. And with these elk still being in kind of a summer feeding pattern, as far as the cows and the calves, they're going to be super predictable about where they're going to feed, where they're going to water, when they're going there. And as the bulls do start to break loose and roam looking for the cows, they're going to be looking along those same patternable areas. So water is going to be important. Bulls are going to have water close to their bedrooms, and they're going to go there and they're going to get a drink, and they might get up 3 or 4 times a day and just go and get a drink of water. Probably not wallowing actively yet, but they could start wallowing actively. And again, we're talking very general here, so I don't want it, to say, oh, elk just aren't going to be active and rutting and wallowing the first week of September, and then somebody goes and finds a wallow that's completely tore up in a bowl that's covered in mud. But it's typically once they get into the fighting and the actual rutting that they're trying to regulate that core body temperature by hitting the wallows. So I would say a drink source is going to be more effective this week than an actual wallow source.
Okay. Are these tactics, these strategies applicable to, I call them unmolested glory tag elk, or, most of us are relegated to hunting some pretty highly pressured public land elk.
Yeah.
And do you approach either of those differently?
I don't, but it's, and I'm maybe a rare case. I love the vocal interaction. And so I'm going to try to instigate aggressive bugling from September 1st through September 30th every day. And then I'll adjust based on what I'm finding out of that. Water can be a really good strategy to sit water, whether it's in a tree stand, in a blind, just in an ambush, keeping in mind what the wind's doing as the elk are going to be coming to water. That can be a good strategy early in the season. Some blind calling where there are elk in there. You're seeing sign, whether that's rubs, whether it's fresh tracks and poop, whether it's, the herd's there, and just setting up and giving some soft cow calls and maybe a light bugle, non-aggressive bugle, and mix in a little bit of raking that, hey, there's a young bull here with these cows, and another bull hears that and thinks, yeah, it's getting pretty close. I'm going to go in, and maybe today's my day, and maybe those cows are going to come hang out with me, and I'll leave Charlie down there, raking his antlers. It's just, they aren't just plugged into the rut yet, and that intense activity, but it's getting close. And some of the bulls forget to look at their watch and realize it's too early, and they fire up a little early. So, these tactics they're gonna apply. I would say I use very similar tactics throughout the month, but keeping in mind I've got a little better opportunity right now because the elk haven't been pressured by humans yet, so they're not quite as cautious. I've got a little bit of a disadvantage in the heat is going to make them bed down sooner in the morning and come out of their bed later in the evening, so they aren't going to be as active. This year, you couple that with a full moon, and that window of activity is going to be very small during this week, which leads to another strategy, which is midday hunting. And early in the season when it's hot, the last thing you think of is hiking vertical mountains, sweating, trying to find an elk to be active in the middle of the day. But these bulls they're just stuck in their bedroom all day. And just like a little kid that gets sent to timeout in his bedroom, comes a point where the bedroom's just not appealing anymore, and they want to get up and move around and just stretch their legs. So that midday can be a time when a bull starts getting a little more, I wouldn't say he's up and moving around necessarily, but he's more awake. And he might be more apt to respond to a bugle from 11 o'clock in the morning to 2 o'clock in the afternoon during a full moon during the early season. So I certainly wouldn't go back to camp and say, oh, it's so hot out. I would stay up on the mountain and stay above a north face with the thermals coming up. And if you know elk are in there, just wait for a response.
Yeah, that was a point or a question I wanted to get to, because so often this time of year, you have those long stretches where you just don't hear anything. You might go 2 or 3 days, and it's like, I'm in the wrong spot. I see sign, I see everything, I can smell elk, but they must have left. And I think people have a tendency to, go back to camp and say, they're just, it's a waste of time.
It's too hot. The elk aren't talking.
Yeah.
It's just too early. So, and I think that's a common thing that a lot of hunters do, is just going back to camp in the middle of the day. And middle of the day can be some of my favorite times. I think it becomes an advantage during a full moon because they are in that bedding area so much longer that middle of the day, they do start getting a little bit restless, and you have an opportunity there. It's a good time for a bull to get up and go to water middle of the day when it's hot out. And you'll find bulls at a water source 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Then they go back and bed down until 7 o'clock in the evening and get up, and you only have a half hour, an hour to actually hunt them.
Well, that's an awful lot of information, Corey, in a half hour.
It is. Yeah, and it's a good starting point. Like I said, it's very general. And you mentioned, it's pretty common this time of year to go out and spend 2 or 3 days and not hear a bugle. And then you start getting frustrated. And I think it's, there have been so many times where we've been in that situation, and then you just walk over a ridge and you bugle down into this new little basin and a bull fires off right there. And I think the efficiencies during this week are as high as any other time of the season. Your encounters and your opportunities are going to be a lot lower. But when you do find one, make sure you get that good setup. Make sure that you start with cow calls and listen, and don't just go right into aggression and push him out of there. He's left the other bulls because he doesn't want their company. You try to get aggressive at 300 yards, and he might just move to a secondary bedding area quietly, and you never hear from him again. And then also towards the end of this week, those bulls are going to start roaming. They're going to leave those bedrooms and those staging areas, and they're going to start going to the areas right above the cows. Still not probably jumping right into establishing harems and dominance yet, but they're going to start moving. You'll start seeing single bull tracks on ridges or on logging roads. And those bulls are just getting out and they're walking 3, 4, 5 miles, letting out a location bugle here or there, smelling for cows, trying to find where the cows are, so that when game day action does show up, they're on the sidelines ready to go. They're not up in the nosebleeds anymore.
So kind of a transition, and hopefully people understand that an elk doesn't get up on September 8th, look at his calendar and say, oh, I got to behave differently today. This is all in flux, and every elk is going to run on a slightly different calendar based on how he feels that day or that week or where he's at, and by age and by so many things. So these are general ideas. Don't think that, can't use this tactic because it's September 9th. Just, it's just this kind of wave of elk behavior that's going across the landscape at this time.
Yep.
The whole month of September.
There's all these variables that they're interwoven throughout there, and they each affect each other. And, one thing we haven't talked about yet is Labor Day weekend. And Labor Day weekend brings a lot more activity, not just from hunting pressure, but every hunter pretty much has a 3-day weekend. So they're going to take advantage of Labor Day weekend. It's opening weekend in Montana. It's the first full weekend of season in most of the western states. So there's going to be an influx of activity, and the elk they recognize that. They know that there is human activity in the woods now, and they're going to change their behavior to a degree. And with elk, with the full moon and a lot of human activity during the middle of the day, during the daylight hours, they're probably going to take advantage of nighttime activity more during that last part of the first week. So there's that variable in there. Weather's always the wild card. The hotter it is, the less active the elk are going to be, especially in daylight hours. And so there's all of these things that could combine to make for a really slow first week, or you might get lucky and get a rainstorm that cools things off and the bulls just stretch their vocal cords and you're hearing bugles pretty regularly.
Yeah. Well, that's great stuff, Corey. I always, in my mind, I think this first week of September, I got to go find them.
Yep.
Not always, but I kind of my mobility and my moving around helps me. Once you get past that and start getting more into September, now they're going and looking for cows. So the odds of us intersecting and encountering each other get a little higher, and that's kind of what we'll talk about in the next episode. I think if you feel we've covered this adequately, we'll let people marinate on this, go and try all this for the next week, and then we'll have another episode for them about September 8th through the 14th.
Yeah, second week of September is coming up. So anybody heading out this week for the first week of September, good luck and stay hydrated, cover a lot of country, and may the bugles be with you.
May the bugles be with you. All right, folks, that's about, gosh, that's an awful lot of information, Corey. Thanks for entertaining the questions of the outline, and I think people are going to get a lot of benefit out of that.
I sure hope so.
Thanks, folks. Good luck out there.